Okay, here we are, live baby ducklings. I'm not real happy about the lighting, but so see what I did here was I added another another stave so that they have a little more headroom because they've grown. It might be a little better. We're looking at the big five here. We have a couple that we're not growing, so they're separate in their own little box. There we go. That's good. Yeah, we have a couple that were that need some alone time with each other. Yeah, eggs. Yeah, we don't eat these ducks. These are egg ducks. By the way, I am smoking delicious Alfacher tobacco. So if it looks like there's a campfire nearby, it's just that. And you'll know when I cough too. Yeah, duck eggs for bakers, for people who make cakes, especially even cupcakes. Duck eggs are a completely different deal. But the side effect is that they're so relaxing to watch, and it's not windy today, so it's nice. Not a lot of swimming going on right now. Do you think I should do this through Twitter Live? I don't know. Um, I don't uh, see that. I saw where Attorney General Barr was talking about the Hatfield Federal Building in Portland, and he said, "Look, these demonstrators wanted to destroy it," which is patently true. They're demonstrating for the right to burn it down, and of course, he was roundly mocked um, by a bunch of people who have no idea what Antifa wants. For them, if they could do a Bonhomme Richard in the federal building, they would do it. They're not trying to break in to redecorate the fucking furniture. They're breaking in to burn the place down. Just like last week when they broke into the Portland Police Association, which is their union building, they broke in and lit a fire. And these idiots that, I mean, the ones who piss me off are the Republicans who hate Trump so much that they can't see the truth of what Antifa is doing in Portland. And when somebody like me, a conservative who used to live in Portland and did a morning show in Portland, when I tell them, put your Trump hate aside for a second and just wrap your mind around the fact that there is a loosely organized, and it's actually, frankly, far better organized than is being portrayed, but there is a decentralized, pretty well organized um, domestic disruption organization. I won't say domestic terrorist yet because they haven't moved to that next level, which I think they will. If Trump is reelected, probably the next day they'll become an actual kinetic terrorist organization. But make no mistake, they're besieging this federal courthouse every night because they want to break in and burn it down. And I want federal property protected because I'm one of the 51% of people that pay federal taxes. Yeah, I got into a um, I got dunked on by this guy, Tom Nichols, Radio Free Tom, who I like. He's a really smart guy. He's a huge Trump hater, and he wrote a book about 2 years ago called "The Death of Expertise," and he was mocking Congressman Dan Crenshaw, the former Navy SEAL, the guy who lost his eye. He's a congressman, Republican from Texas, and he said, "Look, they have uniforms." And he said you could call them anarcho communist fascist whatever. He didn't say I call them anarcho communist or whatever. I mean, I get that those things string together are almost contradictory, because communism is a structure and anarchism is not. But they don't know what they want. They don't know what they are. They just want to tear everything down and abolish the police and end banking. I mean, they spout communist Marxist rhetoric at the same time that they spout anarchist rhetoric. So I really don't know how you pigeonhole them. And so, so there was widespread East Coast elite mocking yesterday, where Antifa is not a real thing on the East Coast. And they're conflating and confusing the black clad Georgetown University sophomores that they see running around Washington, D.C., with what I've seen with my own eyes in Seattle and Portland and Eugene. And if if you're an objective, smart person, and you saw, like I did with my own eyes, the WTO in November of '99, I was a talk show host at Cairo in Seattle, And then during the daytime, I had to be a field reporter. And what I saw back in 1999 was scary because they were far better organized than anyone thought. Their mothership was Eugene, where they basically lived unmolested, and that's why they lived there. And they would metastasize out every once in a while for some protest in Portland, and they would materialize with no warning. They were very well organized, so don't make that mistake. And they decided that uh, their uniform was all black. And sometimes they wore the anarchist A. Some of them did, but over the past 7 or 8 years, they've taken on a brand, which was Antifa, which was co-opted from a German organization, you could say, from the 20s and 30s that were fighting actual fascists. That's the difference. Is that in 1928 and 29, they were fighting a fascist organization called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP, the National Sozialistische Deutsches Arbeiterpartei, the NSDAP, and it was shortened as Nazi. And the Nazis were flat out fascists. And you know what the Nazis' number one tactic against the fascists and communists was to recruit them and pay them. They recruited communists. They were street fighting the commies in 1924, 25, 26. Then they began recruiting them and saying, hey, look, we're socialists too. Why don't you become a Nazi? We pay better. You have dining halls. You can draw a payday loan. The equivalent of that and all that. So they had all these street fighting communists in Nazi uniforms and brown shirts, and they called them Braunschweiger, like the sausage, because they were brown on the outside, red on the inside. And the Nazi Party wound up recruiting a lot of street fighting troops, the SA, the Sturmabteilung, the stormtroopers, who were communist. So it's not contradictory. I mean, if you know the history of how the Nazis took power, the first thing they did was to make it seem like there was lawlessness and disarray on the streets. And if you know anything about Germans, you know that Germans are genetically incapable of tolerating disarray. And so it was perfect. A Russian communist never would have done it. But a German communist is still a German. And so when the Nazis came along and said, hey, look, you guys are never going to stick. Why don't you become a National Socialist? It's socialism, but with a German face. Besides, we pay better, and you'll still get to kick ass, but we pay way better. So that's how they recruited a bunch of communists. And Antifa, at its core, is a movement that is based on the fact that I'm white, middle class, but I hate my parents. So I'm going to gather together with people, and we're going to worship this like it's a religion. And we're just going to, meet and destroy shit and convince each other that we're changing the world. I think I'll see if I can change the camera angle here and get a better. There we go. But no, when Republicans minimize Antifa just um, because they hate Trump, they're being foolish. They're fooling themselves. Trump or no Trump, Antifa exists, and that is just that. I think I can get better light if I do that. Yeah, it's definitely nap time, isn't it? In answer to a earlier question, yeah, the book that I'm working on, obviously, I got I sold the rights. They didn't do anything with it, so I got them back. But it's a script now, and so I need to novelize that. And there's not really a better time to do it than right now. Look at their little eyes closed. I mean, I posted on Twitter, and I'm guessing you most of you follow me on Twitter, but I posted and I pinned it. I'm going to leave this up there for a while. For sake of argument, if you wanted to organize an anonymous, decentralized internal disruption or operation to provoke a TV-worthy spectacle, what would you do differently than what we're seeing? Um, and Really nothing, because in threatening to burn down a federal building, you're forcing that federal response, because the nation wasn't paying attention when it was Portland Police and Oregon State Police or Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, right? Somebody redirected them to the federal courthouse, which is counterintuitive because it was the federal government. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General in Minnesota, former congressman, Congress imam, he was the one who wanted the feds to investigate Minneapolis police. You know, the federal government is always the one that steps in when a local police department goes turbo, right? Just look at LAPD and the consent decree and all that. Um, and so if your issue is that you claim that there's a disproportionate number um, uh, of black victims of unarmed black victims of police violence, well, you would turn to the federal government. You wouldn't turn to the UN. And so clearly, what they're doing, somebody directed them to the federal building to get a Trump reaction. And someone has told them to keep up the pressure. Someone's paying for them to be there, and to continue making it a federal thing, even though the federal government had nothing to do with the death of George Floyd. Um, so, so there. If you and I have this is some inside knowledge. Most of these Antifa guys, especially the organizers, are walking around with prepaid debit cards. Where did they get them? They don't have to say, and they don't say, but they're walking around with prepaid debit cards. And the money's being deposited by somebody into those accounts. And they're operating with cash and passing the cash around, the whole thing. That's how they operate. And they have burner phones and the whole thing. Um, well, that's the question. Who's paying? By the way, if you go to blacklivesmatter.org, BLM.org, and read their mission statement, especially BLM LA, they state in their mission statement that they want to deconstruct the United States, and destroy the nuclear family status quo. And I mean, that's got nothing to do with George Floyd or racial justice, or whatever you want to call it. Nothing whatsoever. So it clearly is a political movement that is piggybacking on some high profile, very ugly TV incidents. The murder of George Floyd was horrible. That's why the guy's in jail. And but it's being exploited. So if you were an external opponent of the United States and you knew that you couldn't attack San Diego, what would you do? You look at the vulnerabilities of the United States, and vulnerability number one is the First Amendment. And if you can fund a pre-existing organization that's willing to do the dirty work, look at that stretch, to do the dirty work, and take the arrests and all that, and all you got to do is give them prepaid Visa cards. Why wouldn't you do that? This thing, my phone is saying that it's too hot out, and it's gonna shut down, save the phone. So if the signal suddenly goes blank, that's what it is. I could try to unplug the battery. That might help. So let me try this. Is the DOJ aware of what I'm saying? I would assume so. There's some specialists in counterinsurgency warfare, which I count myself amongst, who are watching this from the outside, and we have been for 20 years in the Pacific Northwest. um, the National Guard Reserve Special Forces groups, 19th and 20th. Um, this has been free training. It's been a case study, watching a couple things. Chechen terrorists in Chechnya were raising funds through U.S. Bank in Tigard, Oregon, in 1999 and 2000, 2001, and they were infiltrated by a certain group, a group that answers to the federal government. And so this has been going on for a while. And I mean, I know guys who do this. I'm one. I watch these organizations from outside, and I look at it objectively, and I ask myself, well, okay, in the counterinsurgency that I did in Sadr City against Shia insurgents, and in Salmanpak down south of Baghdad against Sunni insurgents, if I wanted to run a counterinsurgency undercover group, what would I do? And I would set up a group that looks like Antifa, and they would they would call themselves holy warriors, defenders of Islam, whatever the local gestalt is. In Portland, it's we hate racism, we hate fascism, we're anti-fascist, we're anti-racist. And if I went around calling myself an anti-racist and you opposed me, then you would be, by definition, a pro-racist person, right? Instead of challenging my very name. But when you have a group using fascist street fighting techniques, but they call themselves anti-fascist, someone has to call them on their bullshit. But then again, they're decentralized. So who do you call? And then also they attract all these useful idiots from around the country. The beneficiary there is LA, because a lot of these assholes would be doing this in LA if they were better organized down here. But they're better organized up there. And that's where you get handed, a $200 or $300 prepaid Visa card for your room and board, or your tents, or your gas, or whatever. But this stuff doesn't happen for free. And these kids aren't going home to mommy every night. They're staying somewhere, and they're eating food somewhere. And even if the ones who are throwing bricks and all that, even if they don't have a prepaid Visa card, what they are getting is the benefits of that. They're getting hot meals, they're getting sandwiches and water, and the whole thing. So they may not know where the sandwiches are coming